Well, good morning and welcome to the Well. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Danny. I am one of the pastors here at our church and excited and glad you're here. You're in worship with us today, especially if it's your first time. It takes a lot of courage to come and try any church, but also maybe it's your second time or your fifth time or your 500th time. It still takes a lot of courage to return to a church. And so whether you've been here for our first day ever or this is your first day ever, we're just glad and excited and honored that you're here and that you're in worship with us. Today, as the screen says, we're in a sermon series called Passing the Torch, where we're talking about what it looks like to raise up the next generation and do it with intentionality, to really think about what it looks like to invest in the generations that come. And we've been trying to use the analogy of like passing the baton or passing the torch, right? Like you have to really hand it off so they can run and run well. And so we've been exploring what that looks like. And today's message will be a little bit more unique than any we've done. And so that'll be exciting, but we'll get to that here in just a moment. But if I was giving you our big idea, kind of like our sermon in a sentence, where we're going, it would be this. So if you want to write it down or you want to take a picture of it or see it on the screens, it says this: when young people wonder aloud or out loud, we don't lose faith, we actually keep it alive. And I think that might sound to some of you like that's really profound. And some of you are like, of course, like we're allowed to question and we're allowed to wonder and we're allowed to do those things, but that's not everyone's church experience, right? Like some people have been told that their questions are the enemy. Their questions should be squashed and pushed down. I've shared this before, but if you're new, you maybe never heard this, of my twin brother. I'm a twin, and I remember when we were in Sunday school, he asked a question about heaven and hell. And the look on that Sunday school's teacher's face, man, she was mortified. And then she made sure my brother knew never to ask a question in a church setting ever again, right? And some of us, that's our experience, right? We're told that questions actually destroy our faith. And I would challenge you to at least believe with me for a moment that, as the screen says, as we wonder out loud, that it does keep our faith alive. It doesn't diminish it. And what we're going to do is look at a story that actually shows Jesus as a teenager or as a boy. Oftentimes we jump from like 8-pound, 6-ounce sweet baby Jesus to adult miracle Jesus, and we skip over. But there's one story of boy Jesus in the Gospels. It comes out of the Gospel of Luke, and it shares a beautiful picture of like awkward adolescent Jesus. And it teaches us, I think, what we might be able to learn as the adults in the room. What does it look like for us to take on a posture that elevates the generation to come? But also for those of us that are in that age bracket, say like, what does it look like for us to own our faith as a teenager or as an adolescent or someone growing in our faith? I think there's actually a lot to learn, but it's usually a story we skip over because there's more exciting stuff like walking on water and turning water into wine and other things. But there's a lot for us really interesting in this story. And I think illustrates for us that questions don't destroy our faith. And challenging things doesn't destroy our faith, but it actually depends on them, and it builds up a stronger faith in that. And so if I was giving you the context of the story, and you can open up if you want, we're going to be in Luke chapter 2. We're going to start in verse 41. It's going to be a longer chunk. It'll be on the screen, and we can read it, but if you want to open up your Bibles, you can turn there. But before we get into that, I would say the snapshot of this is the only story that we see between Jesus' birth and his ministry. Again, so this is around 12-year-old Jesus, and if you're familiar with like the Jewish tradition, you have friends that are in the Jewish faith or community, around that time is when if you're a boy, you'd have your bar mitzvah, or a girl, you'd have your bat mitzvah, and this time that's like a rite of passage, moving from child to adult. And that's not just for the kids' sake, it's for the community. They would look at this 12-year-old and look at them as an adult, and they would treat them as someone that had something to give to the community. They weren't pushed back into a corner, they weren't treated with pandering questions or thoughts, but like after their bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah, they would be looked at as someone that had something really tangible and valuable to give to the community, as any other adult would in the room. And the setting of this story takes place in the temple, a place of learning and development and faith and questioning and tradition, really the epicenter of tradition for the Jewish community, which is interesting in itself as we see this story. And if you've heard it before, here's my challenge for you. Try to hear it with fresh ears. It's hard to do, right? Like you've heard a lot of stories before, but really like listen to it and say like, what stands out to me? There's a practice in the Catholic faith called Lectio Divina where you read things over and over again, and your goal is to like have something new hit you in that. And so maybe treat it like that if you've heard it before. Like say, man, what new hits me in this? If you've never heard it, this is wonderful. You get to hear it with fresh ears. And so say, what hits me as I hear this for the first time ever? But again, it's going to be out of the Gospel of Luke in the 2nd chapter. We're going to start in the 41st verse, go through 52. I'm reading out of the NIV, if that matters to you. Again, you can see it on the screen or open your Bibles, and we'll go through it together. It says, every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom, and after the festival was over, his parents were returning home. The boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. See, even Jesus can be a little bit naughty, right? He's defying his parents, right? But he stays behind, they're unaware of it. And it says, thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day, and then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. And when they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. Stopping here for a second. As a parent, this is terrifying, right? I've left a phone charger behind. But imagine leaving your kid a day behind. Not like you left the ballpark. But they're a full day behind, right? And so they have to turn their entire caravan around to head back. And it says, after 3 days, they found him in the temple court, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And the 3 days is important because this wasn't just they got to Jerusalem and they searched for 3 days, but it was a whole journey of turning everyone around. If you've ever had to get group consensus on something, they're hey, everyone, this Jesus kid's really that important. We should all go back and find him. They turn everything around. Then they get there and they're searching for him for 3 days, and they find him on the temple courts, sitting, learning, and asking questions. Everyone who heard Jesus was amazed at his understanding and his answers. But when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." Again, as a parent, quite literally the first thing that would come out of my mouth. I wouldn't be so happy to see you. I'm why did you do this to me? You can hear that anxiety in their voice as they see their son. And then Jesus says to them, why were you searching for me? Didn't you know that I had to be in my Father's house? They didn't understand what he was saying then, but then they went down to Nazareth with them, and he was obedient to his parents. His mother treasured these things in her heart, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and with man. And we read this line, the last line is important, he grew in stature and wisdom with God and with man, that's important. The line before that I think is really important, that Mary, the mother of Jesus, treasured this moment, right? Sometimes as parents or as siblings or as mentors, these really hard moments, we look at them and that was a pain. I just need to get through this season, or I need to get through this moment. She's just barely through it, and she's already treasuring this time that probably caused her a lot of internal wrestling and angst, a lot of anxiety and frustration. She's looking at it, and she's really treasuring it. And again, it was something catalytic to the growth of Jesus among stature with how people saw him, but his own faith grew in this. I think that's important for us. We look at Jesus and he's got it all figured out. This was an integral faith development moment for Jesus in his life. But if we zoom in on verse 46 of this, we see something quite interesting in here. It says that he was listening and asking questions. How many of us ever think about Jesus as the question asker, right? We think about him as the person giving answers. Really interesting, actually. In the Gospels, Jesus answers something like 3 questions. He asks 300, which is just interesting. He's asking way more questions than he ever answers. But here, it's he's actually diving in and asking questions with the leaders around him. It says they're learning from him and he's learning from them. There's this mutual road of learning happening here. And this isn't something that Jesus invented happening in this moment, but this would have been a practice called Midrash, which would have been something that Jewish people would have engaged in, which was the process of collective questioning and wrestling and diving into looking for mutual but also unique understandings of what God might have to say. They're looking for not just one answer, but a myriad of answers. How might God be showing up? And there's these volumes of rabbis going through the process of Midrash. You can see them arguing about topics, and they put them into books and volumes for people to read. And oftentimes they talk about it saying it wasn't about getting to the answer as much as it was about the journey that we got there, and the idea of seeing that there are more places that we might be able to land and eventualities that we can go to. And we see this is the first practice that Jesus dives into before he walks on water or before he does any miracles, before he heals anyone or teaches. He's engaging in the process of wrestling and question asking in this Midrash journey of trying to see what truth God might have to say, both that he could speak to as a 12-year-old in this moment, but he's saying, what can I learn from the other adults in this room? And the Hebrew word of this word, Midrash, is to seek, to inquire, and to explore. And we see that Jesus' faith initially is an inquisitive one. It's an explorative one. It's one that is seeking things out. And when we look at our own faith and say, like, what might we be able, as the adults in the room, to learn? Like, how do we embrace that kind of faith that seeks and inquires and explores? And for our youth in the room, like, that's the beautiful thing about your faith, is it's already there. Like, there are no silly questions. There are no stupid questions. There's only exploration. There's only growth. And the question for us is, how do we elevate that in the voices of the youth in the room? And how do the oldest of us in here get back to that kind of faith that is okay with the wrestling, okay with the questioning, okay with going about learning in this sort of way? And it's actually something that we see, if you go all the way back for us to the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament, it's an integral part of what they would have found foundational to their faith. And we've hit a few passages in Deuteronomy through the course of this series. And the Old Testament for some of us is like a tough read, right? And so it's hard to dive in there. But when we look at it, there's like a reason that it's a part of our faith. And there's a reason that it's a part of our whole Bible, because we learn something about the story of God and story of us. In Deuteronomy is a book all about like cultural building together. And how are we building this culture based on the rules and the laws and the structures and the things that we have. And in Deuteronomy, there's a really interesting passage that on its nose might not sound that interesting, but it says this. It'll be on the screen. It's Deuteronomy 6:20. It says, when your children ask you in time to come, so which is like saying they're going to ask you questions, right? Like if you have kids or nephews or you teach, questions come up. So they're going to ask you questions. They're going to ask you what the meaning of the decrees and the statutes and the ordinances and that our Lord has given us. They're going to ask you those questions. And this comes in like a greater context of a set of stories where they're saying when they ask you about the Levitical laws, there's like 600 laws that are given in Leviticus, and that we see across Genesis and Exodus and Deuteronomy, these sets of laws and rules. When they ask you about those, which seem like really boring or like guardrail rules or punitive, and it's like these things that are out there, when they ask you about those, your response should be to tell them about the true meaning of these laws, the true meaning of what's happening here. Because God is more than just like a rule keeper, and God is more than just like a law keeper. The 615 Levitical laws are not there to try to make God's people feel bad, but they're supposed to be a reminder of our call back to God, and that we don't get everything right all the time. And so how do you find truth and hope in the midst of that? And that's what's happening here. It's saying that we should look at these as the adults in the room and use them as testaments to tell our story of how we've seen God, not just in the miraculous, but in the mundane, how we've seen God in the day-to-day following of our life and our journey in our faith. And I think it emphasizes for the adults in the room, for us here that have maybe been a part of this journey of faith for a while, that there is an importance of passing our faith and our understanding of what that looks like on to the next generation. Like things aren't just inherited passively, but they're actively passed on. And so there's a role for us to be kind of storytellers in that. And if we go back to the story of Jesus in the temple, that's what's happening there. Like Jesus is asking questions and he's getting responses back. Some of them he probably loved. Other ones he probably hated. And he's going back and he's pushing back and he's getting a part of that. But it starts with this mutual conversation. I think it encourages us as the parents, the teachers, the leaders in the room to be open to share our stories of our faith. But again, some of us weren't taught that that's okay. We were like, the Bible says it, that settles it, or check your questions in your brain at the door. Don't ask anything, just come in and believe. And what this story tells us is, I would say, first and foremost, is that faith is meant to be questioned to lead us to a deeper level of our faith. Like a faith without questions, I think, is not doing justice to the kind of faith that we have. And I think instead of fearing questions, and I would say like the why would God questions, sometimes we fear those, especially as adults. Like when someone says, why would God, we're like, oh, please stop talking. I don't want to answer this question. Probably because we have the same question ourselves, right? But instead of fearing those questions, we should see them as evidence that faith is alive and being passed on. Like if we weren't asking those questions, we wouldn't be exploring. We wouldn't really care. Like the questions are evidence and a sign of an active and growing faith. And for us as people that are a part of raising up the generation to come, I think we have to ask ourselves how to create a space that is safe enough to ask not just some questions, but all questions. And how do we view those as a part of growing our faith? And then how do we as people that have maybe tried to tell ourselves we have to have all the answers become like, as Jesus reminds us in the Gospel of Matthew, to take on a faith of a child, to ask questions and to be inquisitive, to be exploratory, right? Because we see Jesus talk about this in Matthew 18, where he talks about this idea of like, unless you have the faith of a child, you're not going to inherit the kingdom. And we talked on this a few weeks ago. The context of this was like kids were coming to Jesus, and all the disciples were like, get away. He has big people stuff to do. Like, we don't need the kids in the room, so like, go away. He's got to talk about the law and the rules and all these important big guy things, right? And then Jesus is like, stop. You're like missing the point. Like, unless you have faith like a child, unless you have a faith that is exploratory and inquisitive and full of wonder and imagination, like, you're probably going to miss the kingdom that is not hidden and veiled in somewhere, but it's right in front of your eyes. You just don't have the imagination and the wonder to see it. And Jesus is encouraging that. And I imagine in Matthew 18, where he's saying that, he probably has his first moment in the temple, the story that we just had in his mind, of like this beautiful moment of him being allowed to ask questions, him being allowed to push back, him being allowed to give answers, right? Like, we overlook that. He didn't just ask questions. It says that they were amazed by his responses and teachings back to him. He had something to say to the community. And like, how many of us feel like we have something to say, but no one wants to hear it, right? Or maybe we've been told we have nothing to say, and so we start to believe that lie. Like, what this story tells us is we have a voice, and we have something to say, whether we're 10 or we're 100, right? Like, we have something to say, and God wants those voices to be shared in the community of believers in front of us and around us and all together. And so I'd end with this. I would say the next generation, they may challenge us. I think they certainly may clarify and sometimes even correct our faith. And my challenge would be to believe that as a gift, and that is not a threat. Questions and challenge and clarity are certainly not a threat. It is the greatest gift our church can have. A church that doesn't have this Midrash going on, like the 12-year-olds in the room asking big, bold, scary questions, I think might not be asking big, bold, and scary questions themselves. Like, they ask the questions that sometimes we don't have the courage to ask, but deep in our hearts, we all are wondering as well. And so I think the question is, how do we allow that to be? And so to put on our best version of this, we thought we should maybe do that. And so we're going to actually invite some of our middle school youth to come up and one of our youth leaders, and we're going to ask them some questions and let them engage in this with it. Yeah, you can clap for them if you want. And I would also add, I'm used to doing 2 services every Sunday. They aren't, and so they should get even more props for doing this twice. They're up here doing this 2 times. And I told them that they don't have to say the same thing they said last service, so it's going to be fun to see where we go. But they certainly can. But if you guys would introduce yourself, say who you are, your age, as we ask the question. We have a couple of questions for you, and the first one would be, anyone can start and anyone can answer any or all of these. You guys don't have to if you don't want to. But what's one question about God that you personally have been thinking about lately?
My name is Harper Roberts. I'm in 7th grade, and I've been wondering, how do things that we know that God has done tie into other religions and other people's faith?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kennedy Stinger. I'm in 7th grade too. I want to know why bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
I'm Lorelai Roth, and I'm in 7th grade, and I'm wondering what God's plan is for me.
Yeah. Quickly, I'll say, great questions. I'm not going to answer any of them. But they are great questions. But would you raise your hand if you've ever had one of those questions before? Right? So, and they saw all the hands go up last service as well. And so they know that our entire church has had these same questions about purpose and meaning and why things happen and why they don't, and how connected are we to all of those things. And sometimes we feel like those are bad questions. And I'm so grateful you guys share them, because even in just sharing them, you're teaching us that we ought to be able to ask those. And sometimes we've had an opportunity to wrestle with those together, and actually we're going to take some of these and try to put them into some of the sermons we go forward so we can try to teach on these things. But here's what I would say, is first and foremost, their questions are not unique just to them. Like, we wonder about those things. And so I hope for you guys that's an encouragement to understand that we're all in this journey together. And for the adults in the room, whether you're 20, 30, 40, 50 or beyond, don't pretend like you don't have questions. You have them. We just proved it. We all have the same set of questions together. Danny, I have a question for you. What have you learned about God from working with this group of teens? And so Danny will say this, but Danny has undertaken the Herculean task of making us have a youth ministry here. We did not have one last year, and has brought this to be. We got coffee like 2 years back, something like that, and Danny was like, I really wish we had a youth ministry. And I was like, I do too. and then Danny made it happen. And it's done a great job. But what have you learned about anything from just working with these kids, life and faith?
I joked about it at first service, but honestly, patience is a big one. But dealing with different personalities, different hard questions. I mean, these are questions that they're thinking, and then they ask. They ask me questions, which is great. They're a bunch of talkers, which is good and bad. But I have learned how to take God's grace and God's love, and I have learned how that I have been applying it to, I mean, I love these kids. You grow to love them. Youth ministry is not easy. So you have to love it. If you don't love it, it's not going to work. So I really just appreciate and love these kids so much.
Yeah, thank you. Back to our youth. How have you seen God at work in your life or in the world this last year?
One way I've seen this is, let's be real, I'm a middle schooler. I do stupid stuff. But when I do this stupid stuff, I could get really injured, but a lot of times God protects me from getting hurt, so I can continue to do this sort of stuff without, being in a hospital.
Yeah.
I'm a middle schooler too, which the teachers can be really strict because in elementary school they kind of like baby you and they teach you how to do it. And then like this year, my social studies teacher, she looks strict and sounds strict, but she's really nice, and I feel like God's there to like get me through the hard times through school.
Yeah.
One way that I see him in my life is he's brought my church friends to me and my school friends to me so I can make it through middle school happily.
Yeah, I love that. What would you say is something you wish the adults understood about you guys as it relates to church? Like, what do you wish they understood about church from your perspective?
Probably that we have opinions and ideas for the church too, and that we want to help shape the church whenever we get older and right now.
All the pressure that kids and people put onto you.
A lot like Lorelai said, we have ideas to help this church grow, and we want to have the chance to implement these ideas, with help, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, and I imagine similarly to the first one I said, raise your hands. I imagine if you raise your hands, you would probably resonate with those, the pressure of life and wanting to speak into this thing. I think both of those things have been what have drawn many of you here as a place where you feel actively connected, not just as an observer, but a curator. And we want to make sure our youth are actively a part of that, not just in one moment, but all moments. And be a place where it feels not just like a place we go for 1 hour on one day as a respite, but a place that helps carry those burdens and those pressures of life so that we always realize we don't have to do them alone. Danny, do you have the mic? You want one? How can the whole church, not just our kids ministry, but how can the whole church support the generation to come? Because sometimes we think it's like the volunteers back there or Wednesday nights with you. How can the whole church be a part of helping shape the generation to come?
So see us, support us, especially when we do fundraisers. But, I mean, they're in here every Sunday. They're not in the back. They're in here. They're with us. So I think just, when it's turn around and talk to somebody, remember, they may not be as willing to jump out and say hi to somebody, but they are willing to talk to everybody also. So just acknowledging us, seeing them.
Yeah. And I would remind you as well, maybe this isn't abundantly clear. These are not the only youth we have. We have a church full of them, and so they're representing, which is wonderful. But there's so many people that you could get a chance to say hi to and talk to and be a part of. And I think in the way many of you feel, maybe you don't like when I make you talk to each other during the sermons, but you have an opportunity to meet someone. These are wonderful people to meet as well, and I think can speak into our faith. And that's actually the last question I have for you guys. I want you to be like Jesus now walking into the temple. He had something to teach the congregation. And so this is your opportunity to teach us something. And so if you could tell us one thing about what it means to follow Jesus from your perspective, what would you teach us?
I'd kind of say it looks different for everybody. Like youth group, we just have fun and hang out with each other. And yeah.
Even though if you're having a bad day, God will be there for the highs and lows and the bad days and the good days.
Jesus and God can give you confidence to do things that you're scared to do, but you know that you kind of need to do. You can make a change no matter how old you are. About a year ago, some kids gathered to make a petition. It's hanging on the wall over there if you want to read it. But yeah, Jesus and God give you confidence to do the things that you feel the need to do.
Yeah, I made a really unpopular decision like a year and a half ago to take away the beanbag chairs, and they made a petition. And so we hung it up as our first official document of the church. So it will go with us wherever we go. And it was the first time of many where the youth really led a decision-making process for us. So I want to thank you guys so much. Can we give them a round of applause? I really, truly hope that this can be a growth moment for us as a church as we consider how to integrate the generation to come. We are certainly having a Sunday where we have our youth present in that front, but one of the things I think churches do negatively is they do one youth Sunday a year on like the lowest attended Sunday of the year, and they call it good. And so the question is, how do we actually make youth an integral part of our church, the way we've made people that have been hurt by the church a part of our church, and people that have been told no by the church an active part of our church, not just in terms of being up here, but being and leading and shaping and guiding. And so we're going to continue to explore spaces for you guys to help us lead and grow. And I think in your guys' spaces, ask yourself that too, like how can I create space for this generation to come to speak into my faith, but also find their place in helping not just participate, but lead in where we're going. And so thank you guys so much.